I were a praying man, I pray this journal finds its way to you. Trusting that it will, I will use these last words to pass down a means of carving the bond between myself and my partner into this flesh. This is how it is done.
In Indal, there are a great many paintings depicting all manner of hells. But I think real hell might be closer to something like this.
Long ago, too long ago, I used to think like you. Indeed, it led me to climb the world tree. However, I did not find Elysium or the architect. I believe it was because I was unworthy.
Watch humans closely and you'll learn one thing. Deep down, they wish they were dead. They kill each other like they swat flies, running towards oblivion like blind rats. They see the divine flame of life and piss over it. They're genius at that. In a class all of their own, really. Oh, that flame is wasted on them. So I want to give them a little push in the right direction. As the benevolent servant of our wise dad should. The name's Malos. I'm the same as you.
No. No. Why? Jin! Why the hell would you do this? What good does it do you?
Why, you ask? Then let me ask you this. Blades are granted phenomenal power from our Creator on high, yet we are doomed to never remember. Why?
What?
The accumulation of memories is what allows mankind, no, all life to grow, change, evolve, but blades are fleeting. When we return to our cores, our memories are lost, our growth snatched away forever.
People aren't so different.
Man's life too has an end, yes. However, though each individual life is fleeting, you pass on your memories, allowing you to grow as a species, as a culture. Why does Indal control all the core crystals? By controlling the moment of every blade's birth, they enslave our entire kind. How is that fair? We have no culture because Indal decrees it. Because that's what your kind do.
Jin!
Why are you the masters and we the slaves? It is we who embody the very nature of this world.
Blades embody the world. I don't get what you're...
If you saw the last state of humanity, you'd understand. Now that you have come this far, there can be no turning back. But I'm afraid your journey ends here.
While Amalthus is inspired by the legacy of his ancestors, Jin is also driven by the loss experienced by his previous incarnation, in particular his former life with Cornelia. In Torn, he addresses this fact when referring to those who have not been afforded that chance, which is referring to his past selves and all the loved ones they have lost and forgotten. Azurta reveals that Jin had arrived at this conclusion in his past lives as well. Thus it was not just his current self that he burned to ashes at the end of Torna. While Jin does only remember his current self, the reason for his actions are not limited to just Laura, but also Cornelia and the countless other loved ones he can no longer remember. While Rex and Pyra made a promise of reaching Elysium to save the world and move on from their emotional trauma. Jin and Malos made the very same promise but with the goal of destroying the world for vengeance. While one pair made this promise on a sunlit meadow overlooking a rural town, the other formed their pact in the rainy alleyways of an industrial city. Another neat detail is that Jin is the only Blade Driver enemy without an elemental weakness, as his Flesh Eater ability gives him control over all ether particles. In a sense, this makes his perfect Flesh Eater powers a lesser form of the Aegis ability, while Numa draws her powers directly from the conduit, which allows her to rewrite reality itself. Jin's abilities are limited to the already pre-existing ether, allowing him to merely manipulate that which already exists. This fits perfectly with the villain's thematic inability to bring about change, instead living in a state of stagnation. This is further empathized by Jin's empty moment that he only gains after turning into a Flesh Eater. The empty moment referring to the endless life that stands in complete opposition to the one moment he wishes to spend with Laura at the end of Torna. Azurta was right that being in this state of continued existence, that Jin now finds himself in, will allow one to eventually move on from the past and open up to new relationships. Yet ironically, Jin failed to realize this and instead used his newly formed bond with Malos as justification for acting on these dark impulses rather than as an opportunity to move on from them. Humans' ancestors and Blade's previous lives are ultimately no different from one another. Without Amalthus suppressing their development, Blades undergo the same cultural development as humans, passing down their mimetic imprints to their reincarnations. In humans, this might be in form of genetics, religions, and traditions of previous generations, while in Blades it is their physical appearance and identity which has been shaped through their past lives.
It may be this is exactly what they wanted. Become Titans. Have a longer life with humans. Huh?
Oh, nothing. I was just remembering the previous time you said that.
I did?
My reply was, how about you? And what do you think you said?
I don't wish for forever. All I want is my life with her. That's plenty.
Ah. Spoken like a true blade. No one can begrudge you that.
I wonder how it was for you.
Well, honestly, I suppose I may well have been just like you, Jin. Still, being like this isn't so bad either. After some years, or centuries, you find yourself ready for new relationships. I came to realize that.
New relationships.
Speaking of Amalthus, the biggest juxtaposition between him and Jin is sadly lost in the English translation. In Japanese, Rex and Zeke both make very specific references to the type of sadness that is being reflected in both Jin's and Amalthus' eyes. The kanji they use refers to a sadness born from loneliness, more specifically from missing a loved one.
He looks so sad. Why did you look so sad like that?
Similarly, as all characters serve as different explorations of the story's central themes, all the main vocal tracks in the game's soundtrack, the two ending themes and Drifting Souls, do fit all of the major characters. This isn't all that surprising considering that Takahashi did write the lyrics himself. For example, Drifting Souls lyrics are all about becoming disillusioned with the world and searching for a lost love. Eventually, the person in the song considers climbing the Jacob's ladder, ascending the tree of life, achieving gnosis. but ultimately decides to let go of said ladder and keep walking on their own 2 feet, staying true to themselves and not losing hope in humanity, thus eventually finding what they were searching for. This refers to how all the major character in the story and their disillusion with the world strive to evolve beyond the flawed nature of humanity, with only Rex and Numa learning to move on, and to accept both the good and the bad, resulting in the miraculous return of Pyria and Mithra as 2 separate entities. By accepting Numa's sacrifice and destroying the world tree, she was able to both metaphorically and literally let go of the Jacob's ladder. While on the topic, let's also take a moment to dissect the final boss theme after Despair and Hope. Its title is obviously a reference to Malos' prior boss theme over Despair and Animus, which was itself a remix of Amalthus' theme, showing how Ion is the instrument that allows Malos to break free from Amalthus' influence. While it is not as epic as Zanza's theme, the idea of an epic choir constantly falling apart into a very basic metallic riff gives the song a very artificial, music box-esque vibe. It sounds artificial and overblown, just as Ion is just an overhyped machine and the Architect is just some guy. Malos and Rex are just 2 guys with different ideologies whose battle marks the boiling point of Aelrist's slow demise. In this context, it fits perfectly that the final boss theme pretends to be greater and more epic than it really is, as the engine behind this charade constantly breaks down. It sounds like a music box slowly falling apart, just as Malos himself begins to crumble. Jin constantly hides his third eye behind a mask, symbolizing how he is still able to cling to his sanity. This artificial persona created by his bond with Laura serves as a way to convince himself that he is acting for a just cause, rather than for his own Luciferian wish fulfillment, while Amalthus thinks that he is acting on the Architect's behalf. Jin has no delusions about his actions and is fully aware that Laura didn't want any of this. The mask given to him by Laura is not only physically masking his corrupted core crystal, but also serves as a mental protection, a constant reminder that he isn't acting based on some higher calling, but out of his own flawed human nature. Hence why the mask, the persona, granted to him by Laura, the Adam Cadman figure, is concealing his corrupted nature. By hiding behind a mask, it shows that while alike, Jin is more human than Amalthus, and that Rex can still gain knowledge from him by peeling back that mask. Amalthus, on the other hand, presents himself as Praetor, an infallible mouthpiece for divinity. There is nothing to be challenged, nothing left to be gained.
Hey, Jin. That mask. You don't need it anymore.
Yeah. Since you're a Knight of Torna now, there's no danger of getting in trouble for resonating with a stolen core.
What should we do with that?
Nothing, I think. I think I'll keep wearing it. You went to all the trouble of making it for me.
Yeah. I mean...
Huh?
Someday I'll die, and just like that you'll return to your crystal. Even if you forget everybody, at least you might be able to keep the mask that I made you.
Laura.
But I imagine that day's still a long way off, so don't worry.
If I were a praying man, I'd pray this journal finds its way to you. Trusting that it will, I will use these last words to pass down a means of carving the bond between myself and my partner into this flesh. This is how it is done.
However, that Amalthus was able to awaken Malos to resonate with an Aegis core shows that he wasn't always beyond redemption, and in fact once had the potential to be like Adam and Rex, before becoming consumed by despair. The game often refers to Amalthus' inability to awaken Mithra's core crystal. While not confirmed, I think that after awakening Malos, Amalthus eventually lost his aptitude or innocence after subconsciously reveling in the chaos created by Malos, ultimately resulting in him becoming another Zanza figure and being rejected by the Blade system's safety measures, which is likely why he lost the ability to resonate with Mithra and had to give her core crystal to Adam. Thus he created the cleansing process, likely a result of Hayes' power which he absorbed through the Blade Eater technology to circumvent the original Blade system. Amalthus' real descent into madness, however, isn't until the events of Torna, the Golden Country, where we can actually pinpoint the exact moment of his downfall, but more on that later. Pyra and Rex share their core crystal in a patterned fashion, the inner part going to Rex while the outer part stays with Pyra and Mithra. Thus their connection is represented through two different patterns that when put together create a unified larger whole which is restored to its full appearance once Pyra and Mithra return as two unique entities. Meanwhile, Amalthus' possession of Hayes' core crystal is referred to as having an unnatural appearance as the two symbols ultimately look the same, leaving Hayes with an upward-pointing triangle and Amalthus with a downward-pointed one. I'm not sure if it is intentional, but the two triangles are also symbolic of the occult concept of as above so below, which is represented by the upwards and downwards pointing hands of the Baphomet. It symbolizes that the natural laws of the macrocosm and microcosm are ultimately identical to one another. This symbol also represents the alchemical magnum opus, the transmutation of the profane earthly matter into the divine, in other words the unification of opposites, which Amalthus tries to achieve through the fusion of the duality between blades and humans into his transcendental Blade Eater form. Of course, Amalthus stealing Hayes' power and modifying it to control all other blades is also representative of his nosification that is represented in the upwards and downwards pointing appearance of their unnaturally shared core crystals. Similarly, Amalthus' psychological obsession with controlling Mithra is an expression of his desire for the anima that was denied to him. He wants to be the philosopher king but is clouded by his delusions of grandeur. Amalthus killing the baby, which Torna pretty much clarifies by talking in past tense, and Mineth being alerted by the sudden stop of its cry while Amalthus claims he had arrived late, is more or less the human equal to Jin denying the core crystal's resonance. Jin sees this as sparing them from losing their driver and potentially live on as flesh eaters like the rest of Torna, while Amalthus killed the baby because he sees it as mercy from having the child grow up without their mother, as he did. In Torna, Mineth is not only fascinated with preserving history but also with the bond between driver and blade, showing that since blades are influenced by their drivers, even Amalthus may have believed so once, although this has been buried within the recesses of his damaged psyche, only shining through in Mineth's interest for their bond and his expression through historical playwriting being based on wanting people to truly understand the past.
It's weird, though.
What is?
I mean, don't you think it's odd? Normally, if a blade or its driver dies, it'll just go back to being a core crystal. So why is Fan just dead?
I did wonder the same thing. There's only one way I know for a dead blade to keep its physical form. Remember Minoth? I mean Cole. He was a flesh eater.
Yeah.
But Fan wasn't a flesh eater. I can say that for sure.
What's that?
That's the shape of Fan's core crystal. Well, how it used to be.
Now it's a triangle.
Rex and I are quite a unique case, but this is different still.
How is it different?
If a blade shares its core with another, its shape changes in a uniform fashion. In our case, the center part went to Rex, and the outer part to us. I don't know why that is, but it seems to be a rule.
But Fan's isn't like that.
Exactly. It looks more like someone stole her core, doesn't it?
Please forgive my interference. Time runs short.
Amalthus!
That's Hayes' core crystal. Fan Lenoir's. That's it, all right. The The half.
What is it? Nia!
Amalthus. He took Fanlanon's core crystal. He's using her power.
Not only that, this is in fact my original primal power.
Mitra!
The artifice! No! Stop!
Mitra! Mitra!
On the other side we have Malos reforming his original full crystal, which allows him to reform his Monado, with the Monad representing roughly the same idea of unity as Amalthus. Once his crystal is restored, Malos never uses another blade again, while he previously took a backseat role after the death of Sever. Jin on the other hand is almost a perfect mirror of Amalthus in the way his core is represented. Both Jin and Amalthus are the only characters with a core crystal embedded on their forehead, while one of them is a blade eater with half a blue crystal. The other is a flesh eater with a fully developed red crystal. Although they tried to remain stagnant for all eternity, they were only able to slow the flow of time in their own change. While they tried to preserve their hatred for eternity, Jin by freezing the corpse of his loved one, and Amalthus by surrounding himself with those he loathes. They both eventually stop feeling hate and have simply become depressed after 500 years. Even Amalthus ended up changing over time. Ironically, trying to preserve himself only made him degrade even more as the years went by. Pyra and Mithra on the other hand eventually became cured from their cursed existence by allowing themselves to change and literally be reborn. Eternity can be a long time to collect bad memories. However, eventually once you allow yourself to change, the person 200 years from now will be an entirely different entity with different thoughts, beliefs and ideals. And so the correct choice was always the natural life cycle of the blades, which Jin had seen as an eternal prison, due to his short-sightedness and obsession over the here and now. If the villains embody the fear of change and the resulting loss of individuality and ego death, our main party represents the antithesis to this. The main cast is deliberately crafted out of characters that reflect the same archetypes as the crew of Torna. If you put them all together, you get roughly the same personalities that made up Laura's traveling companions, while Rex is a reflection of Laura through his connection with Jin and the way in which he mends Jin's wounds. For example, Hugo's knack for machinery is also present within Tor, while his sense of duty is embodied within Morag. Likewise, Adam's personality is a weird mix of traits that he shares with Zeke, Morag and Rex. Basically, Rex's group feels a lot like a remix of Laura's group, mostly consisting of the same archetypes and personalities but slightly rearranged and changed. Just as the Blades, the human characters also embody the idea of eternal recurrence. However, in their case it is expressed through the constant recurrence and reinvigoration of archetypes, not a death of the old, or rejection thereof, but rather a re-evaluation and evolution of that which came before, standing in complete opposition to the antagonist's refusal of change.
Surprisingly diligent.
You need some help?
Nah, just killing time.
If you want to talk, I'm not sure I'm your guy.
Keeping a journal, huh? Bridget's into it too. Is that like a thing now?
Who knows? I am what I am, and so is she.
You know, when your driver dies, you'll return to your core. It feels kind of futile.
There's nothing strange about wanting to know who you used to be once you reawaken.
You can't be sure you'll even find it though, right?
Even so, nothing's for certain, but it's some hope at least. That's a Blade's lot.
But what's the point?
To keep the bond with your driver alive.
The bond?
I guess that's a little difficult for you to understand.
Hey, don't be mean. You make it sound like I have no heart. What?
What I meant was, the true connection that's meant for you, I don't think you'll find it here.
But Adam's my driver.
Sure, he is. But I feel it's not the same somehow.
Huh?
Your real affinity lies in the future, not in the time we're in now. I just feel that in my bones. Call it Blade's intuition.
Sounds kinda vague.
To change the subject, thanks for before.
For what?
I didn't expect it.
You're both so hopeless with the kids. So hopeless I couldn't just watch.
I'll consider myself told.
Jin is perhaps the most interesting character in the game and shares arguably more similarities with the typical Xeno protagonist than Rex does, with his multiple reincarnations, his transformation into an antagonist following the 500-year-old war, and the death of his beloved. Jin heavily references Xenogears' graph. What is the man to do who had not been afforded that chance? The final words of Torn of the Golden Country are equally fitting Jin's current self, as well as his former incarnations, which we are led to believe had always arrived to similar conclusions about the nature of blades. The Jin we see throughout the main game does not only move forward for his own sake but is also motivated by his past selves. I think this is what Loris quoted, or rather they were supposed to allude to. It is not just the current Jin but all Jins that hate fighting. I think this scene might have originally been planned to take place after finding Jin's old journal but had to be moved in the expanded version of Torna. However, that's just speculation on my part because the line does currently feel extremely out of place and lacks any proper context, or perhaps it makes more sense in Japanese. Like Amalthus, Jin is also cursed by words, both in a literal sense, through Laura's dying words, and in a figurative sense by his promise with Logos. Laura's wish to be remembered forced Jin to walk the earth until the end of time, or until the day I can see her smile again, as he puts it. It's thus hilariously dark how the resulting flesh-eater abilities born from this curse gave Jin the power of absolute zero, the power of complete stagnation, to freeze a moment in time for eternity. Considering that Jin gained the power to halt entropy while Nia gained the power to regenerate all wounds, it seems like successful flesh-eaters gain whatever power they most desire within that moment of consumption. Malos says that Jin was tied down by those words. However, as 500 years are an insanely long time, it is impossible for time to not at least somewhat mend those wounds, no matter how deep they are. And so Jin mostly just ends up being jaded and tired after living for 500 years. This calls back to how even Amalthus has become jaded with his quest over these 500 years, even though he yearns for total stagnation. Jin was also given newfound purpose through his connection with Malos and the pact they formed. With nothing left to lose, Malos' desires for destruction showed him another possibility, a way to bring his eternity of torture to an end by destroying the world. As Rex put it, Jin simply wanted a way out because he, like Malos, is fully aware of the errors of his ways. However, through Laura's words, this eternal stagnation defined his very existence. Both Jin and Amalthus had to find a purpose within this insanity which had become the very basis of their existence, with both of them projecting this purpose onto Malos.
Why didn't you kill me when I joined Rex and the others?
It wasn't a mistake, was it? Becoming the blade of someone you trust.
Jin.
I did that too, once. Rex, you have to stop Malos. He's still searching for his own identity. Tell him the answer you found.
Jin.
You should have died with Torna.
Let's end this now. Our duty has been handed down. Amalthus!
Your duty is as dust in the wind compared to my destiny. Architect! I should have been your chosen one! I lived that you wanted me to? I did! I always!
Ironically, Jin did end up agreeing with Amalthus, believes that the world must be purged, though while Amalthus did it in the name of God, Jin and Malos directed their anger against that same God, a tiny distinction that was enough to make them the deadliest of enemies. This distinction also manifested in the way they see Blades, Amalthus wanting to control them all, and Jin refusing to awaken them. When the Architect tells Malos that this was a decision they made together, it equally applies to his connection to Jin and Amalthus, who both in their own ways made Malos realize that, while originally under the influence of Amalthus' desires, he eventually began to arrive to the same conclusion on his own through his connection with Jin. Ironically, while the Logos represents pure logic, Malos is actually entirely driven by emotions. Not only does Aeon represents Malos' true Monado, its color scheme also has multiple thematic interpretations depending on the context it is portrayed in. On one hand, it can represent the combined nature of Pyria and Mithra, when Rex awakens Numa. On another, it represents the duality of Logos and Numa, and when controlled by Malos, it could also symbolize his shared will with Amalthus and Jin, with the black and red side referencing Malos while the blue and white half is reminiscent of Amalthus and Jin's color schemes. Going one step further, seeing how Malos and Jin are building blade bots, which are very reminiscent of Meccan, Malos and Ion are also reminiscent of Egil and Ualdabo. This makes a lot of sense since for all intents and purposes Malos serves as an alternate universe inverse of Shulk, which of course, makes him similar to Egil in the sense that Egil also serves as a misguided parallel to Shulk, even as he represents the corrupted Luciferian Christ consciousness. Malos still found a purpose as the ultimate evil. He is the Ouroboros that must be overcome to evolve mankind. While previously shown as a second-in-command to Jin, who has basically become his surrogate driver, this is the first time Malos fights his own war. In death he had found his own identity and a purpose to his life in the role of the final boss. Just as Jin serves as a parallel to Graf, Malos serves as a parallel to Mayang, while Amalthus is closest to Krelian. At first Jin is content with the life he has with Laura, however this ultimately changes once he learns that he felt the exact same way about his previous driver. Unable to deal with Laura's death after realizing his past version suffered the same fate, he rejects to continue this cycle by becoming a flesh-eater.
Yet, as your life's candle sputters and dies, whose face is it that rises to greet you? Happy is the man who can sleep in the comfort of the smile he sees then. No, I don't wish for forever. Even just for one moment. It's enough if it's with her. And yet, what is the man to do who has not been afforded that chance? The road stretches on without end. I cannot but walk down it. As long as I keep walking, I can hold out hope that one day the time may come when I see her smile again. That hope keeps me afloat.
You won't come back.
This is the road I must walk. Our paths won't cross. But should we, in fact, ever meet again? On that day,
As his past self also made an attempt to learn about flesh-eaters, this re-empathizes that the previous Gin could have potentially ended up the exact same way, though for some unknown reason he either didn't have the opportunity to consume Cornelia, or perhaps we could interpret this as Jin giving Liv, as the Architect intended it, one last chance. And when his new self ended up feeling the same exact despair, he realized that he was trapped in a seemingly vicious cycle, and lost all faith in the Architect. We see this in Jin refusing to resonate with other blades because he wants to spare them the same fate. This is probably why Jin is so intent on stealing countless cores and yet refuses to awaken any of them or turn them into flesh-eaters. In his eyes, this stagnation has become synonymous with liberation from pain. Refusing to give those blades the ability to evolve and connect with new drivers just ended up mirroring Amalthus' belief that changing would be akin to losing his very self, which is the very same reason Jin's decided to become a flesh-eater and steal countless core crystals from Idol. Ironically, while completely opposed to one another, Jin and Amalthus ended up being the exact same. By turning himself into a flesh-eater, he selfishly denied his potential future selves to find the same love he once did with Laura. This is the ultimate loophole in Jin's logic that Rex, who in many ways mirrors Laura, exposes to Jin in their final encounter, that there will always be a driver standing by their blade. With the metaphorical curse spoken by Laura now broken, his flesh-eater body finally breaks down. In his new life as flesh-eater, Jin had already found a replacement for Laura in his unhealthy codependent relationship with Malos, just as Malos had found a replacement driver in him. Ironically, Jin had already proven himself wrong without even realizing it.
That's right! When a person dies, that's it for them. But their thoughts and memories will always be passed on to someone else. Isn't that the same with you blades? Your past selves get passed down to someone else to become your new selves? Isn't that how you've always lived? We're no different.
From now on, I'll protect you. I'll keep you safe. Always.
Blades become titans when the time is up, and those titans give birth to many new blades, all while forming the world beneath our feet. It's awesome. It's enough to make me envious.
Envious? Of us?
So I'd like to ask the architect, Pyra, Mithra, all of you, why did he create all these incredible people? Actually, I think I might already know the answer. But I'd still like to check with the man himself.
To check your answer?
Yeah.
You believe you know the reason we exist?
Though it is often lost in the game's more light-hearted nature, Rex on multiple occasions makes it obvious that he only lives for the singular purpose of bringing Pyra to Elysium, stating that he has to live until then, or that he won't die until reaching their goal, and being rather uncaring about his own safety. Similar to Jin, Rex is thus also forced to keep on living due to a promise. And while Rex made his promise to Pyra in a sunny meadow, Jin and Malos made the same promise in a rainy city. But in the end, Rex was the only one capable of letting go of his promise despite the hurt. After all, the Elysium he brought her to wasn't the paradise of their promise. By accepting her sacrifice, Rex achieved what Jin was incapable of. After they made the ultimate sacrifice, Rex is rewarded for it with their paradoxical return, because testing Rex and having him live up to his words was the final step in his evolution. Showing that Rex was capable of letting go was the real purpose of Numa's sacrifice, as the scene is crucial in having him actually live up to all the fancy words he said to Jin and Malos. While it is debatable if Pyra and Mithra returning afterwards was perhaps a bit too rewarding, I think the fact that it is left open to interpretation whether or not they lost their memories, and that their separation into two beings helps reinforce the game's theme of dualism, makes their return serve as a satisfying conclusion. Speaking of which, the very last cutscene actually has subtitles for it hidden within the game's code, which have been disabled by the developers so they no longer displays during the scene. The scene has two different subtitles in the game's files: Hello Rex and Hello, my name is Pyra Mithra, depending on which one was chosen in Chapter 8. So while the developers had considered both scenarios, they ultimately decided to leave it up for interpretation if the two of them kept or lost their memories, which in my opinion was the right call. Personally, I like to think that they lost their memories, as it adds just that extra touch of bittersweetness to Rex living up to his convictions. The only negative I have about Numa's self-sacrifice scene is that the emotional struggle should have been focused on her potential memory loss rather than her death itself. Just one or two lines acknowledging this uncertainty would have been more than enough.
Van Damme, that's not my style.
Blades are supposed to heal up right away, no matter what the wound. If the crystal's in one piece and the driver's alive, nothing can touch him. So why is she all bashed up?
That's just how the chips fell. It is what it is.
What it is a problem. It means if one of you kicks the bucket, you both do.
You told me that a good driver always protects his blade. So that's what I'll do. I'm gonna protect her.
Easier said than done, kid.
Listen, Pyra, she saved my life, brought me back from the dead. So I won't die again. I've got to live, for her sake. Until we get to Elysium, at least. We can make it together.
Rex, you mean?
On another unrelated note, based on how they animated Zeke's facial expression and him being the one to rush the group out of the hangar, it seems pretty obvious that he realized that Numa was lying, which makes sense as he is also the one talking sense into Rex later. And yes, if you look closely, even Bride's eyes are open as they leave the Ion hangar, which makes sense considering she is probably one of the more likely characters to catch on to Numa's act. Pretty insane how much attention to detail they put into a blurry background character for a 2-second long clip. But since they put so much attention into Bride's animation, Zeke's expression here was most likely also an intentional hint to his awareness of the situation.
Look, I haven't got a clue about boosters or velocities, but I'm gathering that we gotta get there, and fast.
Okay, 5 floors down. Let's hurry.
But let's get back to Rex. Upon further inspection, he is also pretty much entirely driven by the teachings of Van Helm, which come up again and again. Especially in his conversation with Adam, it becomes obvious how strongly these words have been ingrained into his character. P.S. They really dropped the ball by not having Van Helm appear in the nightmare section. Rex's job as a salvager, someone diving into the mist between the titans to find hidden treasures, perfectly encapsulates his role within the story as the Platonic philosopher king. As previously mentioned, the construction of Aelrest itself serves as a representation of the larger themes of the story, a macroscopic reflection of the barriers and ideological wars between individuals. Rex's job as a salvager thus re-emphasizes him as a person willing to cross these barriers, and look what separates these individuals from one another, but also as someone willing to acknowledge these conflicts and someone who grows through them as an individual. Just as he dives into the cloud sea between the titans to find the treasures hidden beneath the surface, the way to the world tree only becomes open once Numa awakens and slays Ophion, the snake guarding the world egg. By slaying her own artifice, this symbolizes Numa and Rex breaking down their own beliefs, re-evaluating their own ideals through their ideological clash with Gen, at which point they descend into the underworld, the lowest base nature of humanity, to ascend up the world tree towards God to check the answer they found, to then return back down to Earth a bit more mature. Just as Rex had to venture into the underworld of his own hometown to gain the knowledge that made him awaken his Numa, now Numa and Malos, the observational principles of the world, undergo the same journey.
It's quiet today, huh? That bell. I think it was the sound of our heart. Has it stopped? It stopped. But something's still ringing out. Yes. So we have to go now. We've got to be with Rex.
The story ultimately proposes that the second one stops doubting their own beliefs. One inherently takes on a Gnostic or Luciferian worldview and can only free themselves from this by constantly allowing their worldview to be challenged. So freedom lies not in being proven either right or wrong, but in the embracing of the eternal clash between ideologies. Hence why the story uses this almost contradictory double flipping of Gnostic and alchemical symbolism. Amalthus and Jin are presented as Gnostic because they are delusional and think they got it all figured out, Rex accepts that he is an idiot, that knows that he knows nothing, but by accepting this he can evolve, thus obtaining true enlightenment by rejecting gnosis and fighting his own war against insurmountable odds, to arrive at a higher truth, a synthesis between his own ideology and that of his enemies. This is why Rex refuses to kill Jin, not because of some misguided sense of forgiveness but because he has to understand the reasoning behind Jin's destructive ideology and evolve his own beliefs, lest history will just repeat itself. In other words, filtering the bad memes from the collective consciousness to break the Ouroboros cycle.
Stupid. I was stupid. I didn't understand Pyra and Mithra's feelings. Though we were destined to follow different paths, I tried to walk together. I walked in the shadow of the Aegis's light, blindly walking my own path, while she walked alone.
What are you blathering about?
So, I might be stupid, but I've made a decision.
Oh, what have you decided? You've come all this way. I'll hear you out.
It's obvious. I'll crush you into oblivion and take Pyra and Mithra to Elysium.
Crush us? Me and Jin? You couldn't take Jin on your own! And on top of that, I've regained control of all my Aegis powers! Not to mention the artifices. You're doomed, boy.
I'm not.
That thing is just a used-up shell. You can't rely on it to save you, boy.
I now understand what Pyra and Mithra wanted. And I understand what I have to do to make it happen. What it means to be driver and blade. Everyone, stand with me one more time. Let's get Pyra back and go to Elysium! The bells have stopped.
A signal we should enter, perhaps?
We probably should.
Welcome home, my children.
Who's there?
Father?
What? You don't mean...
The architect is here, but where?
I am always here. Come to me.
Please look! Over there, a staircase.
It seems to lead to a lower level.
Guess we have to.
The last remaining building of the previous humanity is an old abandoned church, which would normally not be seen as a holy place. Yet the architect says that he was always there, and so a secret staircase opens to the underground that leads the characters into their own subconsciousness, and after literally fighting their inner demons they suddenly awaken within the architect's chambers. This represents the hero's journey, looking into oneself and emerging with newfound wisdom. A spiritual hero's journey into one's subconsciousness, deconstructing oneself and transmuting into spiritual gold, an alchemical magnum opus of the individual, after which Pneuma, the unity of Pyra and Mithra, becomes a permanent state authorized with control over all of Elysium, at least as far as the story is concerned. Through this, Rex has become the philosopher king and checked his answer with God. Now able to reconcile with Malos and oppose Prometheus, he returns to his roots, and the earthly salvager's code is heard once more. Fittingly enough, the sixth rule, which is also the number of the devil, or in the Gnostic sense the kaput mortuum, the imperfection within humanity, simply embraces the flaws of humanity and how people can learn from them by truly accepting those different from oneself and striving together as friendly rivals. Rex sees that both good and evil can exist just like he sees the individual identities of Pyra and Mithra and knows that there is always a decision to be made, all of which is not only perfectly encapsulated in his salvager code, but also the words imprinted on Numa. The path of the righteous is like the morning sun, shining ever brighter till the full light of day. And so, right after he recalls this final rule of the salvager's code, and is able to let break free from Aelrest's cycle of hatred, that Pyra becomes permanently transformed into Numa, marking the moment he reached his apotheosis.
Are those the world tree's roots?
Yeah. I bet there's a way up there.
There has to be. I'm good to go. Let's move.
How's Pyra?
She's sleeping. Shall I call her?
Nah. Let her sleep. She's been through a lot.
You're too kind.
Rule 5 of the salvager code. Always be...
I don't think we need to hear it. Come on, let's go.
Hey! At least let me finish, spoiled sport.
Rex, what is it you desire?
What else? To stop Malos.
And if you succeed?
I'll punch him in his stupid face, and then... probably get a drink with him or something. That's the 6th rule of the salvager's code. First have a punch out, then drink to forget. Once you've forgotten, the friendship's all set. I'm not old enough to drink yet, though.
I see. Numa. No, I should call you Pyra and Mithra.
What is it?
I want to apologize for having burdened you with all this.
Don't worry. We're actually grateful. Thanks to you, Father, we got to meet Rex. And everyone else. Those are cherished memories. Father.
I have transferred all of Elysium's data and authorizations to you. Make me proud.
We will.
Rex.
Yes.
I will disappear soon. When I do, the conduit will likely disappear from this world. You will not be able to use your power forever.
I understand. We'll make do somehow.
I'm counting on you.
The story thus reasons that this cyclical negative feedback loop of destruction can only be broken by engaging with the irredeemable to re-examine oneself, letting go of one's own inflated Luciferian superego by clashing it with absolute chaos, humbling oneself and emerging on the other end a slightly better person than before. Malos is able to break free from this curse by pushing Rex, the Platonic philosopher king, to his limits, so that the world may be reborn through the sacrificial death of Ion, the god machine built by humanity abusing the conduit. All of this represents a second alchemical magnum opus of reverting humanity's inflated I that they claim to be an enlightened superego, which was created through Klaus' original experiment, back to its original state. Just as the two halves of Klaus, the superego of the architect and the id of Zanza collapse back into one another and transmute Aelrest into the true Elysium, which is nothing but a recreation of the original structure of the world. With this we can finally understand why the Titanations have been named after the 7 deadly sins. As Aelrest had been corrupted by a false sense of divinity, Rex had to reconnect with the imperfections of humanity symbolized by his pilgrimage to the Titans and the sins they represent. cutting of Aeon's right arm is symbolic of denying this corrupted ideology, severing his twisted understanding of the right-hand path, proving that he didn't truly gain knowledge of both good and evil. However, by being proven wrong, Malos also won as he found his own identity in forcing these opposing ideologies to fight to their natural conclusion. It didn't matter if he won or died. For Malos, the fight itself was the goal. It's the anime cliche of if you kill the bad guys they win, but put into a context where it actually makes sense. Malos realized the mistake both Klaus and Amalthus made, which was also instilled within himself, absolving himself from that madness by making Rex, the next Aegis driver, grow beyond the folly of his precursors. So the end state of Ion, or its telos, gives way to the true Elysium, the original Earth, which in the context of the story is synonymous with the Monado or the Ion Teleos. The telos refers to the purpose of something or what it is meant to become, its end goal. In this case, Malos' end goal was in changing the world with Ion, the destruction of which led to the recreation of Earth, as the true nature of the divine Elysium. So through the telos of Ion, its transformative death, Ion Teleos, or the true Elysium, was born, which makes for a pretty fun play on words. While on this subject, the connection between Cosmos and Telos and Xenosaga also refers to Cosmos, eventually Telos or end state, as the reincarnation of Mary and thus absolute order, which plays into a role in the activation of Zarathustra and the continuous reset of the universe that keeps humanity in this endless loop of nosification and rejection of the collective consciousness. And you do. As you can see, while the stories themselves differ heavily, they all follow very similar themes, so everything talked about in this video also applies to the other Xeno titles, although it takes different shapes in each of them.
Gramps, you knew, right, about Jin?
Indeed.
Why didn't you tell me?
He is not like Malos. To be honest, I didn't know if you could handle it. You care too much, at times. Jin and Malos must be defeated. Who knows how that'll turn out? But facing them is Pyra and Mithra's unavoidable fate. So I kept quiet.
Pyra and Mithra's fate?
She shoulders the burden of sustaining your life. Rex, what burden are you taking for her? Can you live for something and hold true to it?
Yeah, of course. I'm living for them. Pyra and Mithra.
I see. Well, I guess you're okay then. Just be sure to walk your own path, Rex. Believe in yourself.
Rex! Old man, what are you doing?
Old man?
Sorry, wait up!
Numa uses Ion to destroy the World Tree and the Saturnian orbital ring, symbolically rejecting humanity's perverted self-sanctification and reverting Aelrest into a true Elysium, in which she is reincarnated as an embodiment of duality through the separation of the divinely enlightened Numa into the base duality of Pyra and Mithra, born for Rex's true resonance with their core crystal as a simple salvager rather than as omnipotent master driver, all set into motion by Numa herself rejecting truth and instead telling her first lie. This is where the parallels the game has built up between Poppy and Numa finally reach their thematic climax. Poppy represents the potential Numa of the New World, a symbol of how humans may use this concept of Tekken to restart the cycle all over again. The promise between Poppy and Numa is to reject Rex's wish and not have him repeat Jin's mistake. Letting go of Numa is the final test for Rex, testing him to actually learn from the past, and to truly move forward instead of playing God and always manifesting his own selfish desires. In the thematic context of this scene, Poppy becomes synonymous with the conduit and the flesh-eater technology, her ability to reunite Rex with Numa serving as an alternate possibility that might temporarily mend the pain, but will ultimately only lead to even more death and suffering.
I got it! Poppy? Poppy?
It's not okay. Poppy cannot.
What do you mean you can't?
Poppy made promise. Pyra say that Rex for sure asked Poppy Say not help Rex, no matter what.
What kind of promise is that? Please, I'm begging you. All you gotta do is take me over there. The rest of you can just...
Rex.
Come on. Please. She's right there.
Rex.
Gramps.
Sometimes a man must know when to let go.
Why? Why?
Do it for her, Rex. Do as she asks.
Gramps!
Chum, how long are you planning on being a baby? She's the girl you love. You've got to accept her decision. That's what being an adult means.
Rex, I am so thankful that I've met all of you.
The core crystal.
You'll be fine. Without me now.
Pyra. Pyra!
Hello there. I hope you'll help me. Rex, I'm so glad to have met you. Our time together was short,
a fraction of my long, long years. But it's been warmer and brighter than any time I can remember before. You shone a light on my melancholy path. You showed me the way.
So tell me, how was it?
Do you really want to know? Well,
With all of that said and done, we can easily break down the primary characters into an extremely basic alignment chart which shows how all their roles serve to explore different perspectives on the same central themes. The duality between the individual and the collective, and the duality between order and chaos split into 4 viewpoints. Individualistic order, individualistic chaos, collective order, collective chaos. You could also replace order and chaos with stagnation and change respectively, but I think that loses some of the nuance. In regards to how the characters justify themselves, the characters on the order side of the alignment view themselves as morally righteous and are more Gnostic or Luciferian in their ideals. The characters on the chaos side of the alignment are more realistic about their actions, perhaps even bordering on absurdism, for better and for worse. Amalthus is the individual order, the person thinking he acts on divine duty but just uses this as an excuse to make his will absolute. Rex is the individual chaos, the person accepting that the world sucks but also that no one person should decide for the collective. However, Rex first starts on the path of individual order, blindly following a promise and only later learning to fight for himself. Similarly, Shulk also starts out as the individual order on a blind quest for self-righteous revenge only to later accept that Egil had his own reasons to fight. Jin is the collective order, the one who wants to bring about stagnation, justifying himself by thinking that he is just sparing everyone else from the same pain that he felt. Malos is the collective chaos, the person that realizes that the world sucks, but also thinks that the bad far outweighs the good. Malos frees himself from this collectivist viewpoint by spiraling everything into the absolute extreme and having his will clash with Rex on the individual level. This also highlights how Rex is the opposite of Jin, and how he serves as a mimetic reincarnation for Laura, thus completing and redeeming Jin through this quasi-driver and blade relationship. Similarly, Amalthus and Malos, the actual driver and blade combination, are also diametrically opposed on this alignment chart. Within the context of this alignment chart, Klaus is an extremely interesting case because he embodies all 4 states throughout the story. Klaus the scientist is the collective order, the man that wants to evolve all of mankind. Zenza is the individual order who thinks he is the only one who should decide, hence why Amalthus is his mirror image in the other universe and why Shulk, who starts out as individual order, starts out being possessed by Zanza. The architect is the collective chaos, the one who eventually realizes that the world sucks and just watches it burn. The Klaus that agrees with Rex's answer is the individual chaos who realizes that the world sucks but learns to take the good with the bad. It is because Klaus undergoes the start of this transformation at the end of the game that I think he has to return as the protagonist of a future title. so he can come to terms with his actions and complete this transformation that is hinted at by the end of Xenoblade 2. In other words, Klaus' very existence embodies the core themes of Xenoblade within itself, so it would only make sense to have him reconstruct his shattered psychological trinity to finish off the Xenoblade trilogy, which will itself likely be an act-ender for the series itself, at which point it will reinvent itself. There will likely be some status quo changing event at the end of the next game which makes the setting move on from all of the Monado Aegis stuff and set up the next act of the series. All the main protagonists fill this role of the individual chaos, and all of them are linked to this same anima archetype. Meneth siding with Shulk, Rex awakening Numa, Klaus hoping that he can be reunited with Galia. If Klaus were to complete the same arc as Shulk and Rex, he would have to reconnect with Galia after their many reincarnations, and accept the inherent duality of both the good and the bad he had caused, to finally move on. In a new world where imperfect humans can learn to live hand in hand and truly complete one another.
So Elysium was here all along. We're finally here.